Hello and welcome to what will be the final episode of Headstrong Season 4. You're listening with me, Louis Strong, and I host Headstrong. This is a podcast that I started about 2 years ago to try and get the listener to understand what it means to be headstrong. And I do this by engaging with a variety of individuals from all walks of life who are in the public eye to talk to them about their lives and their careers and what headstrong means to them. To me, it means to believe in yourself, to talk about your vulnerabilities and reinforce your self-worth. Now, on this episode of Headstrong, I was joined by the magnificent Simon Pegg. Simon and I were in Slaughterhouse Rulez together, and so I've known Simon for about 5 years now, and it was so kind of him to come onto the podcast. We had a chat about his time on a variety of projects, getting into acting itself, and how important Stratford was to him growing up. We also talked about some of the times where he's not felt so great and had to deal with the word addiction and what that's done to him and his own mental approach. So I really hope you enjoy this episode of Headstrong. This is a quick shout out as well to Priory, who are sponsoring this episode. I really appreciate their support and also all their support to Simon. It seemed a match made in heaven. Priory, a helmet company helping Headstrong, absolutely magnificent. So if you want to go check out all their skiing helmets, go check it out on Priory. They're on Instagram, Facebook, and of course their website. Simon, thank you very, very much for joining me on Headstrong. I really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me today.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a while.
Yeah, when was it? It was like 2000 and when did we do Slaughterhouse?
2000 and I don't know.
18?
Yeah,
no, it was
17.
It was 18. 17, that's right. Yeah, it was 17. Jeez Louise.
God, yeah. But I mean, it's a very different time now that we're talking. Where am I talking to you now in this third lockdown?
I'm at home, sort of in rural Hertfordshire, and I've been here, I was away shooting in Norway and Italy before Christmas, got back in November, and I've been here ever since.
Well, I suppose that's all right. I mean, you're quite a home man now. Everything that I do know about you, very much enjoy being at home. And since March, kind of happened and the whole lockdown scenario, those 12 months then, you've probably quite enjoyed that time, I imagine. Have you?
I have, and I think what I did with the first lockdown was I wrote, and actually with Crispy and Mills, who you know. Yeah. And we've been working on something together, and we were looking down the barrel of a fair amount of writing anyway, and the lockdown sort of, in a way, ended up being conducive to getting a lot of work done because it became part of our daily way of staving off the potential boredom and monotony of lockdown, And so having something to focus on was really important. And I actually really enjoyed the first lockdown because I was very productive,
Yeah, I mean, it was difficult to find that balance. I know that I found the balance quite difficult because and also it might have been very challenging as well because you do spend a lot of time away from home, but I imagine you actually incredibly, loved the times spent with your daughter and your wife and the dogs, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. You just follow my Instagram.
Of course. I mean, we're going to talk about your Instagram, don't you worry.
Oh, okay. I do relish being at home, and one of the difficult things about our job is obviously sometimes prolonged periods away from loved ones because the work necessitates it. But and I always, because I've got a young daughter, she's 11, and children change so quickly that you can be away for a matter of weeks and you come back and you notice the change in them, And so you're always conscious when you're away that you might be missing out on something, and that's that can be a bit of an emotional burden sometimes. So I do relish being at home. I do love traveling,
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting when I was listening to some podcasts earlier in the year, of listening to you, how you interact with your daughter, and it's not just necessarily, phone calls or FaceTime. You were doing it through Fortnite, I think. And,
I think it was Minecraft, although we've just got into, she got an Oculus Quest 2 for Christmas, which is the virtual reality headset. And we've been playing on that quite a bit. And then we realized that if I have one as well, then we can actually meet in the virtual space. You know, when I'm away, we can actually, it's like Ready Player One, you know, we can meet in the Oasis. So I got myself one as well. So next time when I'm in Abu Dhabi, if the firewalls permit, then we'll meet up in a couple of games, shoot some zombies together.
I mean, I've just got this kind of image there of like the hotel door being like left open and you wandering out, and then someone like, oh my god!
It is weird. I must admit. I mean, my first virtual reality experience was sort of at the Trocadero in the 90s, and it was very, very rudimentary. But now, I mean, it's totally immersive and amazing, and I'm really quite enjoying it. So yeah, we'll see how that goes when I'm away.
I've never really done any of that virtual reality stuff. I think I need to get into it. I bet it's so much better than exactly as what you were saying.
Yeah, it's shockingly realistic. I mean, you know, because your brain is your sort of amygdala response is always slightly ahead of your rationality. So things that might frighten you on a reflex way will get you in the virtual space, because the first thing your brain thinks is before you can go, it's not real. And so it can be pretty thrilling, you know, particularly, I mean, you can get motion sickness quite badly. Really? If you go on like roller coasters and stuff. Yeah, because your brain thinks it's moving.
So it's just tricking your brain.
Yeah. And the reason we get sick with motion sickness is because the brain thinks we've been poisoned, because one of the symptoms of being poisoned is the feeling of movement without moving. So that's why people get sick in cars and stuff, because your brain thinks you've been poisoned and so tries to expel all of the toxic stuff it thinks is in you. It's fascinating, I think.
That is really interesting, and that explains my car sickness. Thank you. I mean, I was delighted to see that in December you joined another reality, and that of Instagram.
I did, yeah.
I was curious, did you have a private Instagram before that?
I did, but it was like, it's such a different game. Like, I had about 100 followers. It was just family and friends. And it was generally for kind of keeping up with people. You know, it was like having a mini Facebook page, I guess. I don't have the Facebook, but I never experienced it on the level that of having a public account, you know. And so when that happened, it all sort of changed and became much more immersive, particularly during lockdown when there's not much else to do.
Yeah. I mean, I was really excited to see that you did join, because it's really given an interesting insight into A, a lot of the projects that you work on, B, a slight insight into more of your life and specifically the dogs. Miniature Schnauzer, love it. Yeah. Got a couple myself, so that's always good.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. But yeah, why did you feel now is the time to join Instagram, apart from boredom? Or was it that?
No, it wasn't. I was away. My sort of publicist has mentioned it a few times, because it's quite a good way of, I mean, I've always been a bit conflicted about the kind of profile it gives you, whether that's appropriate for someone who wants people to believe that he can be different people, for people to get to know you too well personally can sometimes be detrimental to actors. Now, that's always kind of been the reason I haven't done it. But then I just thought, screw it, why not? And I was in Venice, and I was working with one of the actors on Mission Pom, Clementi F, and she's got an Instagram, and we ended up making this little film together. And I saw that all the fashion houses are always giving her stuff, and I thought, wow, you know what? If I get an Instagram, maybe I'll get some free shit. So far, I just get like a snowboarding helmet, which is fine by me.
Sick. Hey, that works. I mean, I was going to say as well, it's interesting because, as you say, you are catapulted into this almost a new world by having hundreds of thousands of people following you and seeing what you're actually doing. Do you feel a pressure to maintain a presence in the public eye like that then? And is that what you see social media as for, or is it more for actually promoting the work that you're doing?
No, well, I have a Twitter. I was on Twitter for a long time, and then I got quite a lot of followers, and then I sort of left around 2015 because I didn't entirely like myself on it. I felt it made me very available at a time when I didn't feel like I wanted to be. And there were things about social media that kind of irked me, and I'd see behavior in people that I like and love that kind of got on my nerves a little bit. I think, one of the things was when people die, then, and people, feel like they want to pay tribute to the person, particularly obviously always with famous people, they'll always link this person to them in some way. And, say someone's died, instead of posting a picture of them and saying, I'll miss them, they post a picture of themselves with that person. And it's so much about making it about you. It is a very sort of selfish media. It's a very self-centered media. It's supposed to be. And I used to be really conflicted about that. And I still am, when Larry King died, I thought, I got interviewed by Larry King. Maybe I'll post a picture. And then I thought, well, don't, because that's just you making his death about you. And that kind of thing used to trouble me at night. But now, I don't know. I just felt like, what the hell? It's kind of, I've got all these photographs of stuff that are kind of cool. And people seem to appreciate it. So I kind of took the plunge. So late to the game. Hey, but you're catching up. Yes.
Heavy content, and I like it.
At the moment, I'm not feeling a pressure, particularly because there's lots of stuff to put on. I do, like with the dog walks and stuff, I was doing them quite a lot at first. And then I realized that, oh man, this is like writing a comedy sketch for every single day. And I've recently started to drop videos about myself being partially cybernetic, which has been quite fun. But I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask you, I'm very curious to know what your definition is of the word celebrity.
I feel like celebrity, as a definition, is obviously, is someone who is celebrated to a degree. I feel that the notion of celebrity is an interesting thing because for me, I feel like it is a byproduct of my job, or it's something which happens possibly as a result of what I do. It's not what I do. Like when people say, "Oh, you're a celebrity," to me, I kind of balk a little bit at that because I feel, well, I'm not a celebrity. I sense up myself. I thought, well, I'm an actor and a writer, and particularly when it gets shortened to celeb, which has become this weird passive aggressive term for people who I think overestimate their own famousness or their own importance in the world. So celebs immediately sounds faintly derogatory. And I kind of struggle slightly with the notion of being seen as in it just for that, just to be famous. I don't not like that side of it, and it can be very fun, and it gets you free snowboarding helmets if you're lucky. But it's not why I do this job. I do this job because I like it and I can do it.
Well, exactly as you say, it's not, that is not your job, and that's why I was curious to ask what you saw it as, because I know that you see yourself as definitely not that, but it's just that there are people in this world that's, even children growing up now, that is their entire aim. What do you want to do when you're older? I want to be a celebrity. That's not a job.
Oh, I know, yeah.
And it's crazy. That's what's tragic.
I think it's because the notion of celebrity has become so much more accessible, and in that respect sort of diminished slightly in terms of its initial definition. Like back in the day when you had movie stars and TV stars, and getting onto those platforms was really difficult. It was rarefied air if you were, a big TV personality, or particularly movie stars. They only ever were seen on the big screen. And in that respect, they were celebrated because there were these kind of sort of untouchable, this bizarre kind of, royal family of popular entertainment. But now, because we can all be on television very quickly, very easily now, we can get on YouTube. The notion of what it is to be a celebrity has changed, and it's become more democratized by technology. And so I guess that's why it might wear thin with some people.
No, of course. I mean, now you are on Instagram, you are posting photos, but of course photos on Instagram are just merely a snippet and an expression of the reality that you actually do find yourself in. But
yeah,
where do you draw the line yourself on what you do kind of post in terms of content on social media? Because you are a private person though as well, because where do you draw the line, and how do you find that balance between online and what you show and actually your real private life?
I think the dogs are a nice way of kind of giving a little bit of sort of myself away, but you're not going to see pictures of my family or my daughter or anything like that. Or, there's a line which I think it's fairly easy to identify where stuff stops being everyone's business. I mean, some people are absolutely fine with that and will happily post pictures of their family life and stuff. But I just feel, for me, that's a little too far.
It was when I was on Twitter a few years ago myself, and I knew that I was far too addicted. And, I obviously have zero following anyway. And I got to the point of posting things like what I was eating. And you just think, actually, who the hell gives a shit? That's not what it's for.
It's strange, though, isn't it? It is a bizarre kind of companion. It's like a sort of artificial friend in a way, social media, because you can look to it for validation and support. You can look to it for company, and yeah, if you're on your own, you're sat on your own in a restaurant and you're eating something nice, and there's no one to say, "Hey, you can look at this, avocado toast is amazing." you can always take a picture and send it out into the world, not knowing, who's going to see it or who gives a shit. But,
yeah, it's like having my own Jarvis from Avengers.
Exactly. Yeah, it is that's very true. Actually, it is a strange kind of hive mind, particularly Twitter. It's a very, very sort of rudimentary AI in a way, because it has emotions, and there's outrage, and there's empathy out there, and there's anger, lots of it, and it's all there to access, and you can choose which particular stream of emotional response you specialize in. You can get in there and just fight all day long if you want.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about social media for the whole thing, but it's true, because depending on what day you post something, the reaction might be completely different to another day, and you don't know, like, the events that have occurred that day as well. It's bizarre, actually, how it actually happens like that.
I got into, not into trouble, but I was still on Twitter back in 2015, and I was in Vancouver shooting Star Trek, and there was a t-shirt shop in Vancouver called Bang, and it sells amazing kind of sort of vintage t-shirts with cool logos and stuff. And I tweeted something about, I've just been to Bang, it was great, kind of thing. And then immediately the Boston bombing had just happened.
Oh.
And people were like, how dare you say Bang? It was so strange and so kind of, wait a minute. I didn't even know that had happened. I wasn't even aware that had occurred. But people are so quick to want to kind of,
jump to conclusions almost.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I mean, so Simon, I usually do these podcasts in chronological order. So I'm going to jump back now a little bit because I'm curious, because I know that you love your music, and I'm curious as to where music fitted in from an early age, because I know your father was a jazz musician. Was jazz a big part of your childhood then when you were growing up, or were you into other music?
No, not really. My dad was he was in a show band when I was a kid. So he was playing a lot of the sort of the hits of the time. And it's only as he's got older and sort of been able to relax into a slightly more personal milieu for his music that he's kind of, been in a jazz band for the last 20 years, I guess, but if not longer. But yeah, no, I grew up around musicians and music people, and my dad was always playing me various tunes and stuff. We lived in a music shop for the first 5 years of my life, so I was kind of around it physically then as well. And then and my mum liked her music as well. She liked a bit of John Denver. Still play Rocky Mountain Christmas every year without fail. And then as a teenager, it was kind of, that was what we used to do on the weekend. We'd go into town and we'd go to record shops. And I was at sort of 12 to 14, I was a break dancer. And then I became like an indie kid at 15 and discovered the Smiths and the Cure, and which I'm still flying the flag for to this very day. and then, you know, sort of became a goth. So music has sort of defined me in many ways over the years.
That's interesting. And of course, music is very tightly entwined with performance itself. When did performance kind of cross over? Because I know that you spent a lot of time in Stratford, which I love.
Yeah.
You know, when I've been to Stratford, I always walk down there and I just like try and think back to the hundreds of years. And I just walk down there and I just immerse myself and I think of how cool would this be? Just thinking about what it could have been. But yeah, when did performance then kind of become actually part of your mainstream life?
Well, I guess because if my dad was the music guy, then my mum was the sort of the purveyor of the dramatic arts, because she was involved in sort of amateur drama, and it was a big part of her life. And so I would often go down to the local theatre with her and hang out. It was like a social club as well. It was a big thing in those days. The local drama group, you know, they put on a big show every year, and it would sell out, and they'd have reviews in all the papers and stuff, the local papers. And so that kind of became quite habitual for me, was to be around the theatre. And I enjoyed acting from a very young age, from, you know, school plays, and I didn't actually realize that I could do it as a career until I was about 15. And I found out about a course, the one in Stratford-on-Avon, which offered up theatre studies A-level as a main sort of block option. Usually theatre studies was in that third A-level bracket where you do maths and physics, and then there was that where photography and media studies and all those ones are. But this course allowed you to do it kind of as one of the defining subjects on the course. And so my mum managed to get me a grant from the village that I lived in, and I went off to this college, and that was when it was like, okay, now I'm going to be an actor.
That was the career switcher then? You thought you could actually make money out of this and see it as your life?
It never occurred to me that I could do the thing I liked to do the most as my job. I mean, I was from Gloucester, and Gloucester didn't feel like a particular sort of wellspring of opportunity. And I was going down the career route of thinking, well, I've got to do this. I've got to be a vet or a physiotherapist or something which has a name, and it's sort of, you know, both those jobs are extremely were a high bar that I was reaching for when I was thinking about it. But I suddenly thought, you know what, maybe I can do the thing that I like to do as my hobby. Maybe I can get paid for that. And that was a kind of epiphany, because it felt like the best thing I could do, you know.
And there's a million routes into this industry, all of their own difficulty. But to be honest, all of them are very difficult, to be fair. But where were you mentally when you were trying to break into the industry then? Because you have this dream, and you have certain goals when you're starting out. So your first goal, I imagine, was getting into that course, achieving that. The next goal would have been start obtaining credits, small roles, etc. But where were you mentally, knowing that, you know, you wanted to sustain this for the rest of your life? That's quite a big, daunting challenge.
Yeah, I think after I graduated from Stratford, I decided to go to university to study drama, to theatre, film, and television there, as opposed to going to drama school. Now, that was because my tutor at Stratford sort of suggested it as a route, and I'm glad that I did, in a way, because it gave me a more sort of theoretically grounded approach to everything. I think it equipped me to be a writer as well as a performer and a producer and all those things. But whilst I was there at Bristol University, I kind of became a little bit disenfranchised with everything. When I was at Stratford, I wanted to go perform at the RSC. At Bristol, you're learning a lot of the kind of political, the political situation when it comes to the arts in the UK and generally, and art as a weapon and art as a means of protest. And I started to feel like, you know what, I don't particularly want to just graduate from here and then, you know, try and get an agent and just wait for the phone to ring. And I'd started to get interested in stand-up comedy at university, which felt a little bit more revolutionary, a little bit more, gave me a little bit more autonomy as a performer. And I thought, oh, this is what I'll do. I'll be a stand-up, always with a view to going back into acting, but I'll be able to get out there and say my own thing and do my own thing. And so that's what I did for about 5 years after I graduated from Bristol. I was a full-time stand-up comic. And it wasn't until I sort of got seen by Graham Linehan and Arthur Matthews, who were just off the back of Father Ted, and were putting together this sketch show that I really started to. I did a couple of small things, sort of 95, 96, but then started to head in the direction I wanted to head, comedically at least.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult finding your feet as a comedian. I imagine I'm far from that, because you want to talk about everything, though, don't you? Really, anything that bugs you, anything that you enjoy, and then you want to work with your friends as well. It's so difficult to really find that narrative as a comedian, I imagine.
Yeah, it's people always say, I'd say 99% of the time that I mention being a stand-up, people go, "Oh, that must be so hard." And the fact is, it's hard if you walk out on stage terrified and have nothing to say. But if you go out on stage with a certain amount of confidence, and confidence is about 75% of it initially, if you can back that confidence up with some genuinely good material to keep the act going, it's a brilliant job. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, you'll have nights when you're a bit off your game or the audience isn't great, but they're not that frequent. And going out, it's a very immediate form of gratification that you get. You're immediately validated. It's the crack cocaine of performance, because as a film actor or a television actor, you don't get the validation until a long time after you've done the thing. As a theater actor, you get it, but it's quiet and comes at the end of the show with a round of applause, unless you're performing a comedy, obviously. But with stand-up, it's just you and just the audience, and you are proven, worthy or not, the second you open your mouth. And it's like extreme performance. And I think it takes quite a sort of arrogant, sort of slightly selfish person to do it, And I know some lovely comics; they're all lovely people, but there is that in them. It has to be about them,
No, of course. Oh, it has to be. Simon, I'm very conscious that I've got very limited time with you, so I want to fast track, not denying the importance of those parts of your career, but I want to fast forward to talk about the Cornetto Trilogy.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about, first of all, how important is it for you throughout your career? Because you have worked with a lot of the same people throughout your career. How important is it to have your own team, I suppose? Not even team as well, just people that you can trust and consistently rely on when you're creating the work that you want to be involved in. How important is it to have that kind of group of people?
I think it's vital. And I think, the best thing you can do as an artist, particularly if you're in a collaborative art like performance, is to gather the people around you who challenge you the most, who bring out the best, and you have the most simpatico with, because they will make you better, And I feel like, with Edgar Wright, I just found someone who was like a kind of a soulmate, and both of us have different strengths, and together we were more than the sum of our parts, and we were able to create something which, I'm very proud of and has sort of persisted as well in the public consciousness. So yeah, I'd say that's a very important thing to do. Gather the people around you who you like to be with,
Did you feel that pressure from then Shaun of the Dead into the Hot Fuzz then? Because you're working with the same, Edgar again. Did you feel that pressure on your shoulders that you had to deliver something else, or was it actually for you? Were you doing it for you?
It's difficult to say, actually. Yeah, I do. It did feel a little bit like the second album, because, with Shaun of the Dead, we put in everything everything that was in our brain at the time, and that included stuff from our childhood, from being into zombie movies and stuff. Hot Fuzz was difficult because it wasn't about us. Shaun was kind of me in a way, and a mixture of me and Edgar. And with Hot Fuzz, it was a world that we had no knowledge about. So we had to go out and research it, and, we knew we had to get it right. And so like the first draft of the script was like 280 pages or something ridiculous like that. And it was it was gigantic, but we just had to kind of whittle it down and get it to a shape that felt right, And so I think it's probably technically, I think each of those films has their own. Shaun is probably the purest, and I think Hot Fuzz is technically probably the best, and The World's End, I think, is emotionally the most mature of all three of them. And it's a big thing when you start another script after the last one did well. You always feel slightly nervous about it.
Do you go in on a high horse going, yes, I'm riding off the success of this one? Or are you going, oh my God, I've actually got to live up to that? It's difficult.
Yeah,
depending on which mentality you go in with, it can go one or two ways.
I think if you can't get cocky. That's absolutely certain. You certainly can't rest on your laurels and assume that people are going to forgive you in any way. If it isn't up to scratch, you do have to. But then Edgar and myself, we would never try and attempt to do that, because we wouldn't allow ourselves to just coast. We always try and make the best version of it,
Simon, how cool is this job? Because literally, when I watch Hot Fuzz, and I watch it a lot, it's in the kind of finale bit, and you're driving in the car and you're firing guns out the window, and I just think what a good day at the office.
That was a fun day. It's funny, actually. My daughter watched Hot Fuzz the other day. She just put it on, and I was like, "Oh, you're going to watch this?" And I was sat reading the paper and stuff, but I got sucked into it because I haven't seen it for a while. And I did remember those days. We were driving up and down the back, the sort of private roads on Hatfield Park Estate, just firing guns out of the window at James Bond as well. It was like Timothy Dalton just firing back at us. And it was so, so much fun. It was definitely wish fulfillment kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh. That is just iconic. I wanted to talk to you about Stolen Picture. Because, of course, I'm immensely thankful to you for how much that you, Nick, and Crispian, Henry Fitzherbert, and all these amazing people have done for me. Because, as we said at the beginning, I was lucky enough to be in Slaughterhouse with you. But how long was Slaughterhouse in the making? How long did that take to come to fruition? And how long was Stolen Picture kind of in the making for both you and Nick?
Well, Slaughterhouse, like Crispian had sent me the screenplay. He'd been working on it as a project for an American production company, and it was all set in the States. It was called Sinkhole, and yeah. And then I can't remember the exact. I'll have to ask Crispian, but it became apparent that it wasn't going to get made over there, but it could be made here. So there was the trick was to adapt it for the UK, to be set in the UK. And Crispian went to Stowe. He's had that experience of boarding school, and kind of, rewrote the whole thing around this idea of it happening to a boarding school, and the kind of metaphorical, the metaphor for the country and the class and all this kind of stuff that the film embraced. And that was around for quite a while before Stolen Picture started up. But when we got Stolen Picture underway, it felt like something that we could sort of get behind and try and get off the ground as a project. And so, that's how we ended up kind of co-producing it with Charlotte's company.
Well, we had Truth Seekers come out already. What's next with Stolen? Or am I not allowed to know?
It's not that you're not allowed to know. I'm not allowed to say. We've got a whole bunch of things. We've got a nice slate, and we're working with some really cool people. And we've got a variety of mainly television, because television is really where the revenue stream is. It's not. Film is very hard now, unless you're making huge movies, to really make that much money back from. It's so polarized now, the film industry. There's the little independents, which are increasingly going to be shown on streaming platforms anyway. And then there are your huge movies, your Mission Impossibles, your Avengers, what have you, which will always be cinematic events. Although COVID has meant that, Warner Brothers' entire sort of slate is now being straight onto a streamer, which is worrying. But yeah, the television shows we have lined up are all very exciting. I wish I could tell you any of them.
Hey, I've got a meeting with Emma, so I'll try and nudge her
great.
as well.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Crispian, the thing that Crispian and I are working on is a TV project, and I'm very, very excited about the potential for that, because it's something we've been working on since before Slaughterhouse. He came to me with this book after we'd finished A Fantastic Fear of Everything, which was the first film we did together. And we've been kind of playing with it ever since. And it went through a process of being a feature film. And then as TV evolved into what it is now, this incredible sort of cinematic, albeit smaller screen platform. But, you know, a lot of TV now is like little movies or long movies. You know, some series are like a 10-hour film, which is what TV lets you do. So, yeah, we've got high hopes for that.
How important is it to find that balance then for your own kind of platform and what you want to be creating, but then also acknowledging that you are now part of some of the biggest franchises in the world, because you want to find that balance? Although you do enjoy everything that you put your time into, you probably more passionate about the ones that you are directly producing, writing, and therefore involved in even more. How do you find that balance?
Well, it's not like it's one for them, one for me. I like doing the big things. Like Mission Impossible is always really fun. It's a lot of travel. It's a crazy job. It can be a little boring at times just because there's a lot of waiting around, as opposed to something I'm working on, which is mine, which is much more intensive. But as long as I can do both, you know, I want to go off and do those fun jobs and travel. But I also, and this is becoming more sort of important to me as I get older. You know, I turned 50 last year, and I'm starting to feel like, shit, how much time have I got to do all this stuff that I want to do? And so those projects that I'm passionate about are even more important to me now. But I don't want to lose sight of the big gigs as well, mainly because they pay pretty well.
So what is left then for you to achieve? Do you have anything left in your kind of headlights that you just want to go, yep, I want to do that. I want to do that.
I want to do some theatre. You know, it's been a long, long time, and I would love to to get a really nice play, and you know, with a few actors, and just spend, you know, a season in the West End or whatever. Or I just love to do some theatre. It's been a long time, and I used to really enjoy it, and I feel like I don't give myself the time to do it. So yes, that please.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed from all of us that hopefully we can see some theatre. Definitely. In fact, talking of dogs and theatre, I got a puppy about a week and a half.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. And this is him down here.
Oh, created, very good.
Yeah, and he's called Hamilton, named after my favourite musical, which is literally not ironic at all. There's the book.
There you go. Oh, what breed is he?
He's a working Cocker Spaniel, and he's like 10 and a half weeks, and he's literally the best behaved boy ever. Oh, can't believe it.
They're such a wonderful presence to have in your life. I just, you know, those mornings when I go out with the dogs, I love it, and I love the kind of complicated affection that they give you. You know, they're very therapeutic.
But Simon, for all the good days that we have as actors as well, and this podcast is rooted in mental health, and this is where I really want to talk to you about your own personal battles that you have experienced in your own life as well.
Yeah.
And I think I'm right in saying that actually, you know, it started a long time before you were successful in your career, and you know, you probably had battles yourself whilst you were at university, and even before that. Did you what was that like? You know, there might not have always been something quite there mentally to get over, you know, and the word depression gets thrown around a lot, and people's coping mechanisms, because they don't quite understand it. So what was it that you were experiencing, you know, at university and at a young age, first of all, that made you think that there was something else going on?
I think after I graduated from Stratford, I'd made such an incredible group of friends there. Friends like I'd never had in my life before. I kind of left home really to live away, and had this insane 2 years from 16 to 18, and then it ended. And I think the abandonment that I felt as a result of that loss of those people. We're all on a WhatsApp group now, by the way, which is lovely. You know, we're still all in touch with each other, but at the time, it was devastating, and I think that possibly triggered a depressive episode in me. And that was the first time in the summer of 88 that I experienced depression as a kind of, you know, not as a mood, but as a state of being. You know, people often say I'm a bit depressed when they feel sad, and you can understand that because you do feel depressed when you're sad. But the depression as a debilitating kind of, state of being where you can't wake up, and then you can't go to sleep, and you just feel like this terrible sense of doom and fear. That lasted for about, I don't know, sort of 3 or 4 months, I think. And then I went to university, and that kind of pulled me out of it because I was in a new world and with new friends. But it just always, it always dogged me. And I think as it started to sort of, I mean, when I look at it now, it's related to stuff in my past. I've since worked this through with a therapist, which was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, actually, is to talk through everything. I mean, there were lots of solutions to depression, to depressive disorders, a lot of medications, which are very good and can balance you out. But it really is worth talking through the things which fundamentalize your emotional well-being as you get older, because it all happens between about the age of 7 and 15. All those core beliefs that we lock in then, all of our outlook on life, is pretty much what we take into the rest of our being, and sometimes those outlooks are immature and not right or self-destructive. And it's good to find out why you behave a certain way, or you assume certain things about certain people or about yourself. But the thing is, I found it really hard to ask for help. And so instead of, getting it sorted out when I got depressed again, sort of in my 20s, I just started drinking because it was a very quick fix. And as long as the alcohol sort of was in my blood, then I would feel anesthetized from how I felt. Obviously, the only problem with that is that you have to stay drunk all the time, and that inevitably leads to alcoholism, which was where I found myself, towards the end of my 30s. And it's a very dangerous and destructive thing not to just reach out and say, please help me,
Yeah, I mean, there was no switch, I imagine, for you. As you say, it's a gradual build-up of an amalgamation of experiences and things going on that result in your actions. Did you see it as almost as a self-prescription then, drinking?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It was like, you feel a certain way and you'll do anything to mitigate that feeling, and anything that makes you feel different, you'll just embrace in an addictive way. And that could be anything. That can be exercise or sex or drugs or anything. I'm quite an addictive person. I found myself in moments of vulnerability and depression. I'll get addicted to people. If someone makes me laugh and lifts my mood, I'll gravitate towards them, sort of impulsively and compulsively. And that was a good thing. So you have to address baseline kind of mood, your baseline emotional state, and ask yourself, am I okay here? Because if you're not, then you need help. If you need to, I always see people always say, oh, I had a glass of wine, take the edge off. And I always think to myself, off what? What are you taking the edge off that makes you want to do that? And that's just the odd drink. I mean, alcohol isn't anesthetic. And I think that a lot of people use it and abuse it simply because they want to change their mood.
In that use and abuse period, then, is there, I mean, of course it does affect your memory, but I have no doubt that you do have vivid memories of certain things. Is there anything in particular that you can remember where you were kind of put yourself in a real danger, in a real dangerous position? Or was it actually an amalgamation of these experiences?
Well, you'd always, often being away from home was particularly bad during that period because I would be lonely as well as desperate. And so I remember being away for the first time, coming over to do Mission Impossible 3 and being sort of stuck in this hotel room in Beverly Hills and being so panicky and I'm feeling so unwell that I drank a lot. I drank my entire minibar and kind of because I just wanted to not feel that way. But of course, by the time I came on set to do my scenes, I was kind of a wreck because I was just super anxious and I'd been drinking and, it was it's so self-destructive, because all those fixes are so temporary. They're so quick. They don't solve the problem. They just, dam it up. And so anytime when I knew I was in trouble, and just kick the can down the street by having a pint, it's not the way to go.
You're at the peak of your career and you're dealing and battling with this. How do you, because it almost sounds like and feels like you have to hide it from the professional world, and the professional, when you go onto set, you still have to be that person, that expects you to deliver this role, and, you're being paid for it, and it's, many people would kill to potentially be in this position, but you're battling something very, very different. What was your coping mechanism thereafter? Because I know, of course, you spent time in the Priory, and that's a massive thing, but what was that switch that made you go, now's the time to make that change?
Well, it was because I reached a point of no return. I reached rock bottom. I'd come back from a Comic-Con, I think, and stopped for a drink on the way back from the airport, before I even got home, and it was impossible to disguise the mess I was in, and my wife and my friends sort of intervened, and I kind of woke up there, and that suddenly, having given myself to the prospect of being helped, having admitted that I have a problem, being kind of there to solve it, it was a great relief to me. And I felt like I really want to get this sorted now, because there's no excuse anymore. It's all out in the open. Before I was hiding everything. I'd hide bottles, and I'd hide, I'd be one person in front of my family and friends, and I'd be another person by myself. And to have all that suddenly lifted was a relief. And I kind of decided to get things straight. And so I submitted to this intensive addiction therapy process, and I came out a better person. That's not to suggest that I was fixed in any way, but it certainly gave me the tools to know how to cope.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a man who's been your friend for over 20 years, where did Nick fit in terms of your aid for assistance and recovery? And still, where does he fit in now to, be a coping mechanism almost?
Well, Nick's, obviously I've known Nick for 25 years, and we're very good friends. And I think, but then Nick has his own demons. He's had a very tough life, and has had to face, you have to read his book to sort of see the kind of personal challenges he's faced. And so I think we see that in each other. Men find it pretty difficult to talk about shit sometimes. Like, I'll come back from hanging out with Nick, and Maureen will say, "Oh, how's Nick? How's the family? What's he?" And I'm like, "I don't know. We didn't talk about that. We made fart jokes for 3 hours, But yeah, it's good to know that I have him. He's kind of like my brother, and I don't see him as much as I'd like to. He's in LA at the moment shooting something, but even when he's in the UK, he lives down south and I'm up north, and we kind of see each other when we're in the office of our production company. But having friends is a very important thing. Friends you can reach out to.
In moments of stress as well, then I know that you're now probably even busier than ever as well, still with immense amount of projects on the go. What do you do when that becomes too much? Do you have any other coping mechanisms now to help you reevaluate and focus and see what is important to you?
Yeah, I try and be mindful and to stop and be in the moment, and do a bit of breathing and be grateful, and just keep an eye on myself, and know that, like last year, like 2019, I had a sort of a reoccurrence of the depressive disorder, and I had to kind of take stock of it again, and figure out new coping mechanisms to employ. And it's just about being kind to yourself. I've realized it's about not being too hard on yourself, not making sure there's time for you without being selfish or at the expense of other people. You do have to look after yourself because that's where it all begins. So, yeah, in moments now, I can just say, well, I think I'm having a wobble. Let's do something about it. I have someone I can call. I have good friends. It's a relief to actually say, you know what, I'm not okay. And for men, particularly men, they're raised believing that saying that is weak. Asking for help is weak. There's a big joke about, men don't read instructions and men don't ask for directions. And it's because they don't like asking for help, because to suggest that you can't do something completely by yourself is to suggest that you are in some way not a man. And that's an incredibly damaging thing to believe. And it's probably why there's a huge rate of suicide among men between sort of 30 and 50. It's drummed into us, and it's not a good thing.
So this is a question that I ask everybody that comes onto my podcast. I'm curious to hear what you say. What does the word headstrong mean to you?
Headstrong, I always think about Princess Leia because that was always in her descriptions. She was spunky and headstrong. I think headstrong, it's has a nice double meaning, particularly in relationship to this podcast. Headstrong can be seen as being sort of opinionated and stubborn and kind of unwilling to compromise. But it also has that other definition, which is just to be healthy in your head, which I think is where it's more fitting as the title of this show, because it's a positive reclaiming of a term like headstrong to mean something a little bit more positive.
Well, I needed a pun.
Oh, is that what you're looking for?
No, I'm joking. But it does work.
Yes, it does. I think someone who knows their own mind and is not afraid to promote it.
And that is it for this episode, and indeed this season of Headstrong. I just want to extend my thanks to Simon for coming onto the show. I really appreciate it. I think it was a magnificent conversation, and he's so very generous with his time and support. So thank you, Simon, to you, and I wish you and your family all the best. I also want to thank you, the listener, for sticking with me if you've got this far. And I hope you've enjoyed season 4. I hope you've enjoyed all the episodes and all the guests that have come on. If you have any requests, feel free to drop me a message on Headstrong Instagram or Facebook. I am easily contacted at Headstrong Podcast. We also have our website, so feel free to check that out. There will be a new series coming very, very soon. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for all your support. And you will be hearing from me very soon. Thank you once again to the sponsors of this episode, Ruroc, who have been a match made in heaven for this podcast.